Are you new to investing? Wondering whether or not you can self-manage your properties? Let us tell you about our partner, RentRedi. RentRedi is an awesome property management software that can help you grow and handle every aspect of your real estate investing business. Rent collection, tenant screening, maintenance, lease signing, listing. Honestly, RentRedi has everything.
One of the best features is their new tenant software, Latchel, where you're able to remove yourself as the landlord from being the middleman between tenants and maintenance calls. And it's also essentially a fraction of the cost of what you would pay for property management.
Let me also mention that RentRedi is unlimited. All their plans are flat price. This means you can keep adding properties to your portfolio without having to pay more. You can close on all the properties you want, and RentRedi's price stays the same. Best part about it is for you guys is they've given us an amazing deal to pass on to all Weekly Juice listeners. You can get 50% off any RentRedi plan at rentredi.com when you use our code JuicePod. That's rentredi.com, RentrediI.com with code JuicePod, JUICEPOD, and you'll get 50% off any plan. If this is your first time here, welcome. During our shows, we interview successful entrepreneurs and investors to spread knowledge, advice, and actionable tactics to help others in the pursuit of financial freedom. We discuss successes, failures, systems, motivations, experiences, and key lessons learned along the way in the hopes that these stories help you along your journey. Tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice. If you've been here before and like what you've been hearing, please subscribe, share with friends, rate and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That goes an extremely long way for us. It's simple. Just click on your podcast app, type in our podcast name, The Weekly Juice, click on the reviews, and let us know what you think. The more ratings we get, the more eyes we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you all with high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod for daily content and personal finance tips to assist in your journey towards financial freedom. Welcome back to the Weekly Juice, where we talk real estate, personal finance, and entrepreneurship. Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today we had on special guest Tim Bratz. Tim brought the heat. Honestly, this was one of my favorite episodes by far. He's a very likable and relatable guy, so at least to us.
You would never know listening to the guy that he's worth like near $100 million. Like he legitimately has $400 million in assets that he owns in real estate, and over, I think, 4,500 apartment units. And he talked to us like he was our friend. And I think that that's the biggest piece to take away here, is that he was just such a relatable guy. And all of the success that he's had in his life came from ups and downs and twists and turns. And we were talking to like a true master of his craft. And it was just, we covered everything in this episode.
We did. Comes from a blue collar family in Cleveland, Ohio, and just talked about, he just related it to pretty much every kid in high school, or a lot of people that I know, and like how he elevated his game, how he lost it all, gained it all back, lost it all, and built it back up. Now he's starting a family. He also writes children's books to teach them about legacy and
financial literacy and real estate. And it's like,
he's doing it all. And someone that honestly, I think you and I aspire to be like,
yep.
Honestly. And just, it felt like I was hopefully looking in the mirror of like my future self, maybe not to his extent with 4,500 units and 400 million, but maybe.
Who knows, right? And he broke it down and talked to us like, this is what I would do if I were in your scenario. And I thought that the kind of relatability that we talked about was I had a lot of humility behind it. So I was really excited to talk to him. He brings so much value throughout the whole episode. It's a little bit of a longer one today, but you guys should stay through till the end. It's really good.
I agree. And I would say, don't get afraid of the unit count or the amount that he's worth, because he dumbs it down to the beginnings and explains how he got there. And that's what really looped us. And I think it was like, does not seem like an impossible feat. He talked about systems, how he built everything up, and how he relies on, or not relies on, but really has a presence in the mastermind field. And he's like, this is where you want to put your money. He talked about, I don't want to give away some of the answers we talked about, but without further ado, let's bring in Tim Bratz. Well, Tim, officially welcome to the Weekly Juice podcast. Corey and I are thrilled to have you here. I mentioned it to you pre-recording here that you've come highly regarded. We've been following your story for a while now, have seen you scale your portfolio. I mean, only through social, but just to give people kind of a recap, you have about $400 million in real estate assets and have put only 125,000 of your own dollars into this, which is insane, scaled to about 4,500 units. So if that doesn't get people excited, I don't really know what will. I know a little bit about your story from listening to a few other shows that you've done, but if you could give our listeners a little background on you, kind of your inception into real estate, like who you are, where you're from, and then how the heck you got into this game.
No, well, that's awesome. Well, Ryan, I appreciate you having me. Corey, appreciate you having me, man. Excited to be here. And yeah, we'll dive in. So like high level on me, I was going through college when the market was going crazy before, right? So 03 to 07 is when I was going through college. I'm 36 today. And when I was going through college, I was money motivated. I wanted to make some money. And so I saw just people who had half of a brain making money in real estate. And I was like, if this guy's making money, I'm going to get rich doing this stuff, right? Like if they can make money. And so like, I just got focused on real estate. I got into like the trades a little bit. I started a painting company where me and my buddies would run a painting company in the summertime. And then I interned for a big home builder between my junior and senior year of college. And they offered me a job, but I wanted to be kind of like a real estate entrepreneur. So I moved to New York City. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally, moved out to New York City after college and became a real estate agent. And that's how I thought everybody became or got involved in real estate, was by becoming an agent. And so took the test, parked a license with a small brokerage in Manhattan. And I essentially brokered retail leases and office leases. So I'd either represent a business that was looking for a second location or a third location, or I would represent a landlord who had a retail space or an office space that needed to be rented out. And I'm a new kid, straight off out of school, super green, super naive. They're not going to give me like the real flashy listings, right? They gave me the bottom of the barrel stuff that nobody else had the time to do. And I had a 400 square foot space in an off street in Greenwich Village. And it's just 400 square feet. It's like the size of 2 bedrooms, it's not that big. And we signed a lease for $10,000 a month on that space on 12-year term with 4% escalations every single year. And as a money motivated kid, you start doing the math on something like that and you realize, holy smokes, like this landlord's going to make almost $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something once. And that was one space that he had. He had 8 retail spaces. All the other ones were bigger than that one. And then he had like 10 or 15 stories of apartments above it. And so I remember just thinking like, I'm on the wrong side of the coin. Instead of brokering real estate, I need to be owning real estate. So I start reading the books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read 2 books in all of high school and all of college. I was the guy who just found, the shortcuts for everything that I did. I would only read like the Cliff Notes versions and the reviews and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, when I got out of school, I gave myself like an MBA in just reading all these personal development books and real estate books and personal finance books. And I became obsessed with just understanding how that stuff worked. And so, I'm 23 years old at that time. I'm in New York City, or 22 at the time. And in New York City, I couldn't afford anything in New York City. And again, this is 2007. So I ended up moving down to Charleston, South Carolina in 2008. And somebody just said it was nice down there. The weather, in Cleveland and New York sucked. And I was like, all right, let me go down south. And so I go down south and I go down like through this analysis paralysis thing, right? You got to learn everything before you do anything kind of a thing. And that's what I ended up doing for like 6 months or 8 months or something. When I was down in Charleston, I just studied and tried plugging into some of the local real estate investors associations and tried learning as much as I possibly could. So I didn't mess up. And eventually I figured out that I wasn't going to learn how to swim by reading about swimming in a book and hearing people talk about swimming on podcasts or YouTube videos and blogs and vlogs and all that stuff, right? I need to actually get in the water and try to swim myself, right? And I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people when they're first getting started, especially, is like, they try to learn everything about real estate investing. You're going to learn more from doing your first deal than you ever could in all the books that you could read. You could try to memorize it all, but because you've never gone through an actual transaction, you can't conceptualize and like understand how the inner workings are unless you're out there doing a deal. So you got to go out and do a deal, right? That's going to be the number one most important thing that you could possibly do, is just get the action and start that momentum going. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go make an offer on some properties. I'm going to go buy something. And then all of a sudden the world collapses. And the end of 2008 occurred, right? Where the financial institutions all just went belly up. Everybody's getting bailed out by the government. And the entire cause was real estate. So everybody's like, run from real estate. Everybody goes broke in real estate. Don't get involved in real estate. And I was like, damn, I just showed up to the party and everybody's running out the back door. And so it was actually pretty good though, because I think if I would have gotten in real estate before, I would have done something stupid like, stated income loans and no documentation and told people I made $500,000 a year and got a bunch of money and would have bought overpriced real estate, not knowing what I was doing. And so when the market collapsed in 2008 and in early 2009, when I was ready to start buying, prices were bottomed out, right? Like I was able to go and find super cheap houses on the MLS, and it was just like they'd sit there, right? It was totally opposite of what today's market is. Today, there's no deals, perceived no deals out there, right? With tons of money to be deployed into real estate. 12 years ago, there were deals everywhere. You couldn't walk down the street without seeing 3 foreclosed houses that you could buy for 30, 40 cents on the dollar. But there was no money. Nobody would lend money, especially as a punk 23-year-old kid who'd never done a deal before in the worst housing recession that we've ever had. And so I was like, I think a lot of people let that be a hurdle in their mind too. And, hey, I don't have the time to go invest in real estate. I don't have the money to go invest in real estate. I don't have the knowledge to go invest in real estate. And I heard Tony Robbins say one time, he's like, a lot of people say that they don't have the resources to go and do something. But if you are resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. If you're resourceful, you can go and find the time, you can go find the money, you can go find the connections and find the knowledge. And I didn't know that was the word, but like I never told myself that I couldn't do something. I was always like, well, how could I do it? How could I make it happen? Because whenever I told myself I couldn't do something, like my brain would just shut off and you just move on to the next thought, right? When you ask yourself a question, it stimulates the creative juices to flow in your brain, where it leads you down a path of asking more questions, asking better questions, leading to better and better answers. And so when I asked myself, I was like, how could I get the money? And I look at my buddies and who are a year out of school making 60 grand and they're blowing all of it at the bar and on women and drinks and booze and all that stuff. Right. And then I have my parents who, and family members who, picked me up from the police station from drinking too much when I was underage, and like toilet papering people's houses. And like, that's how they knew me. They didn't know me as a real estate investor. So they're not going to go out and invest with me. And all these private money lenders were either out of the game or they're like super spooked by what was happening with the market and they weren't really lending. And I didn't have a balance sheet or anything like that. So like the only person who loaned me money at the time was MasterCard. And so I called up MasterCard. I was like, I need to borrow some more money. I'm about to make a big purchase. Can you increase my limit? And they bumped up my limit from $3,000 to 15. And that was cool, kind of exciting as a 23-year-old kid. And so I jump on the MLS and I look for the cheapest houses in the entire MLS. And the cheapest house on the entire MLS was $25,000. So dude, I went in low at 12. They came back at 20. I got a little nervous. I went up to 14. And they accepted $14,000. So wow. I literally wrote myself a balance transfer check, took that like a perforated check, handwritten to the closing. And the attorney's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? Like, go put it in the bank and bring me a certified check, whatever. But I ended up closing on that deal. And I physically did all the work to it. I fixed it all up and went through that whole process. And so and sold it about 110 days later and made $13,000 or $14,000 on it. And so it was the biggest check of my entire life up until that time. And I was like, damn, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm making money doing this. Like, let's go do it again. I get into wholesaling, right? Got into flipping. I was horrible at flipping. But then I got into like kind of some like buying rental properties. And so I'd buy a beat up house. I'd fix it up, just make it clean, safe, and functional. And then I put a renter in there, and I was buying houses for $20,000 to $25,000 that would rent for $600 or $700 a month. And it's hard to lose when you're buying at that. And so I built up a portfolio of about 10 houses, including my own primary residence, which I house hacked. And I had a couple of my buddies living and renting from me. And then and I had 9 rental properties. And I wasn't rich, but at the age of 25, I had more residual income on a monthly basis than I had monthly operating expenses for my business and my personal life. And I had about an extra $500 a month because I was self-managing and all that stuff. And so I was like, I got it all figured out, right? Now let me go buy a Mercedes. Let me go and join a private club. Let me go on expensive vacations that I can't afford because I got residual income. It's going to come in forever. And then I started chasing shiny objects of like new businesses. And I thought I was a brilliant business person or something. And ended up selling 9 of my rental properties, only kept my own house, and pursued some other business opportunities and went completely broke within 24 months. I had 25 grand in credit card debt. I had $80 in cash in my account. And I was borrowing money to make the minimum payment on my credit card, borrowing money to make my mortgage payments, like literally selling my nightstand next to my bed on Craigslist to try to get 10, 15, $30 to go and buy food. And so ended up coming to a place where I just kind of swallowed that and was honest with myself and like, dude, I gotta sell my house. The only place that I can get out of this hole that I was in was by selling my own home. And so real estate is what saved my butt. And so I sold my house, made about $50,000 on it, paid down my credit cards, moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, moved back in with my parents at the age of 27, and got back into real estate and essentially, eliminated any overhead that I possibly had in my life. And just got after it from wanting to get back to work. And so I met some other business people. They understood that I was getting back into real estate. They ended up saying, hey man, do you want to partner up? I'll put up some money if you go and do the work and we'll split the equity. And that's how I got my first, some of my first private money.
Wow. That's quite the story, man. So it's funny that you say this because you essentially lived like a full real estate life and then started over. Like you did built an entire portfolio and then started over. And I think people get intimidated when they hear, 4,500 units, $400 million. They're thinking I could never get there. That might be a limiting belief that people have. But then they hear your story and they're like, well, Tim started from nothing, built his portfolio up, was financially free, and then started from nothing again and then did it. So if that's not motivation that you can do it from the position, anyone's position, I just think that's a really, really cool story. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And like that partnership, those guys that brought that money, I gave them 67% of all the deals that we did. And so I think that's a something to understand in itself. So a lot of people are like, no, I want to own 100% of the deal. Well, I always had long-term vision. I always had long-term mindset of like, I'll have sacrifices today for the long-term gain kind of a thing. And so I gave up 67% and I built a portfolio of about 140 doors with those partners. And then that partnership ended up kind of going sour and we ended up separating and going our separate ways. And we had to liquidate the whole portfolio again in 2015, 2016. So I had to press a reset button again and started over toward the end of 2015.
So let's talk about that partnership and kind of, I guess, having to hit the reset button again. I want to first talk about private money lending and structuring the deals, right? You kind of teased us a little bit, right? You went from 9 units to essentially 0 and to get back into it, you had to partner up. And I think people are a little bit scared to get into partnerships. They hear horror stories, if you will, or they're just nervous. They don't want to give up that equity. But can you talk about how to structure deals with other people and whether that, like a lot of people, I feel like at least have the mindset is like, well, if it's a long-term buy and hold, I can't really get in with someone else that I don't really know that well because I'm locked in with them for 30 years. Is there a stigma around that? Is there a way that you can get in for X amount of time and then buy them out? Or give us some examples potentially of what you've done over the course of your investing journey and maybe how people can learn from that.
Yeah, man, I think that's a great question. And I think, people build it up in their heads where they think they have to, first of all, they think they have to use their own money to go and buy real estate. And as you mentioned earlier, like I've only personally invested $125,000 into deals of my own personal cash, right? I've built a portfolio of $400 million. I've raised over $100 million of mom and pop cash from other people, providing a massive value to them to get involved in my deals. And it allowed me to get involved in deals and build a multiple 8-figure net worth by not using any of my own cash, just by using my own ingenuity and work ethic and grit, right? And so first, get that out of your head that you even have to use your own money, right? I think people get caught up. They're like, hey, I saved up $30,000 or $50,000. Like, what should I go and invest in? What should I buy? And like my answer to that is don't buy anything. go and invest in like a mastermind, go and invest in education and get around people who can teach you how to go and raise private money from other people. Because I don't care how much money, I don't care if you got $5 million or $50 million. If you want to play this game, you will eventually run out of your own cash. You will eventually have to go out and raise private money because you're eventually not going to have your own money anymore. So like in order to stay sharp in between the ears, I'm always raising money for my deals. And then I'll take my cash and invest it in other people's deals or lend it out short term or do something like that, or just keep it liquid. So that way I can qualify for more loans. So that's one philosophy there. As far as like deal structure and how do you do that and partnerships and all that kind of stuff. So the issue that I had with those business partners that I got married to them, meaning I had an exclusive partnership with them and I couldn't do any deals outside of what I did with them. And partnerships can go south if you're locked in like that, right? And I realized I don't want to be married to anybody other than my wife. And so now I partner up a lot with a lot of different people, but I partner on a deal by deal basis. And it's a deal by deal joint venture. And if that deal doesn't go right or doesn't go how we want it to be, then I'll just never do another deal with that person again. Or there's a buyout in there where they can either buy me out or I can buy them out at some fair, equitable value. And if we decide to go separate ways or life happens to somebody and they got to cash out, what does that look like? And that's, asking yourself that question, putting that in the operating agreement, the partnership agreement before you get into business with that person. That's why you want to use an attorney for that stuff, right? They're going to start asking you some of these questions of what happens if, this person wins the lottery and doesn't want deals anymore, right? Or what happens if life happens and you want to be in business with this person's ex-wife or spouse or whatever. Like there's a lot of different variables and you got to ask yourself some of those questions. It's a lot easier to navigate that on the front end of a partnership than when everything occurred, right? Or occurs. And so, be aware of that. Partner on a deal by deal basis with somebody. Do a lot of deals with them before you ever consider doing like a long-term, marriage to them. And then as far as like,
could you actually walk us through that? Like, remember you said how you had a 33% partnership and the others were like a 1/3 and 2/3. Could you talk to us about how that deal actually was structured? Like in terms of the cash flow or the equity return? I'm just curious, just based on you having an example right there.
Yeah, it was kind of ignorance on fire. I needed an opportunity because I was totally broke. I just moved back to Ohio from South Carolina. And these guys they put up a $300,000, right? And that was enough for me to be like, all right, I'll get married to you. So the deal was I would take a salary of $3,000 a month. That's what I valued myself at in 2012. I take a salary of $3,000 a month. And then they got 67% of all the equity in all of our deals. And I got 33% of all the equity in all of our deals. And all the money that came in from the cash flows and everything went back into doing more deals, right? So any profits just got reinvested into it. That was essentially high level of what it was. Where it started going south was they put up the money one time and I kept on doing all the work. So I'd find the deals. I'd negotiate the deals. I would oversee project management. Sometimes I'd be the one actually swinging the hammer. I handled all due diligence. I handled leasing. I handled tenant maintenance phone calls. I handled evictions, court, disposition, sales of the property. Like I handled all of it. I paid tax bill. I was doing the bookkeeping. I was doing everything. So I did all the work. And as I did more and more deals, guess what? My value increased, right? Because I don't make the same mistakes, and I'm building the network. More people are bringing me deals. It's my relationship capital that now I'm bringing to the table of great vendors and contractors and negotiating all this kind of stuff. And they just brought money one time, right? And when it was time to bring more money, they did. They brought up to about $1 million eventually, but then they wouldn't bring any more money, right? And they took my salary away, and we didn't make any distributions on, for tax liabilities or anything like that. And then I had a kid on the way and I got to figure out another way to make money because I'm not making any money, right? From this venture, I got equity in it, but I don't have any actual cash. Got it. So I got my real estate license. I had to broker some real estate, and then they wanted like 67% of all my brokerage commissions. And it just got a little bit messy and got pretty hairy. So they lawyered up. I lawyered up. We realized that the only people getting rich were going to be the attorneys. So we decided to sit down and we carved up everything. We said, hey, I'm going to list everything. Tim, you can go and do whatever you want, whenever you want to. And over the next 12 months, we're going to liquidate everything. And that's what happened in essentially late 2015 and throughout 2016. But it actually, it seemed like a big setback, but it was a huge set up for bigger and better things. There were people like, dude, I'm glad you're not doing business with them anymore, because now we can do business together and we can partner up. And
yeah, not only that, Tim, but like I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that liquidation put you in an okay spot too, not like back to zero where you had to sell everything, right? Meaning when you had to sell everything out of necessity. When you liquidated, did that help springboard you into your next venture with building back up again?
Yeah, essentially I went back into like flipping houses again. So in 2015, I started doing a lot of the turnkey stuff and flipping some houses to turnkey buy and hold people, like white collar professionals who had cash that just wanted to buy something. They didn't want to do any of the work. They didn't want to source the deal. They didn't want to manage it. They didn't do anything, renovate it. They just wanted to buy something that was cash flowing from day one. And so I got into that, and we built up an organization and started a management company and all that stuff. And so that's kind of like put food on the table in 2015, 2016, 2017, while we liquidated some of this stuff. Dude, we started a management company. I don't know if you've ever started a management company before, but it is a kick in the balls times 10, right? It's just like over and over and over again, you're just getting kicked in the crotch. And it was,
I feel like that's self-managing. I can't imagine being a property manager myself. Dude, so yeah. Dude,
self-managing is hard enough. Imagine managing for somebody else who's not willing to contribute to the property, who doesn't respond to phone calls and questions on having maintenance stuff done. And then all of a sudden the city's on you because you're not taking care of it. The tenant's pissed. They're not paying rent. You got all this liability on you. And it's peanuts in the real estate game, unless you're doing it at a really, really high level. So,
right.
Dude, it was 100% of my team. Instead of going out and finding deals and raising money and flipping houses, we were just managing properties in like 2016 and stuff. And so it was just like very skinny. So a lot of that money that came in from liquidating went back into just paying salaries to my team that I had built up. Then eventually in 2017, I was like, dude, why are we flipping these houses for other people and building up their wealth? I had passively invested, or not passively invested, but like raised money and sponsored loans for some other people's deals, like states away. And I was like, in 2017, I looked at my net worth and where was I spending my time? And it was like 90% of my net worth was in my passive apartments that were like 10% of my time. And I was thinking, like, what if I took my team and instead of selling houses to other people and building their wealth, what if I just, we just acquired our own deals, right? We could control the disposition side because we're not selling them anymore. We don't have to worry about and scrap and scrape all the time about trying to get these houses sold. We can go source deals. We can renovate them. We can rent them. We know how to manage them, and then we'll just refinance them. And that's my entire business model. I have the Burr method for apartments. I buy, renovate, rent, refinance, rinse, and repeat. And that's all I do. And I just hold on to the property, pay back my investors, and we go do it again and again and again. And so like, that's my entire business model today. And that's what we ended up doing in like late 2017, August 2017. Just put our head down and decided this is all we're going to do. And it was amazing. I had a couple hundred units at that time. And over the course of the next 12 months, by the end of 2018, I picked up like 1,200 doors, or like, I don't know, something like that, 1,000 doors or something. And I was around 1,400 doors by the end of 2018. I picked up another 2,000 doors in 2019, picked up another 1,000 doors in 2020, despite what was happening with COVID. And then this year we picked up about 550 doors, along with a couple of unique properties. We've got a big mountain estate, and I just bought an island, 110 acre island in South Carolina as well.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool. I actually saw pictures of that on your social.
Yeah,
really cool.
Dude,
congratulations.
It's pretty cool. Thanks.
So that's a lot to unpack. The one I keep going back to, and I haven't gotten the answer I'm not really selfishly looking for, but Corey and I get into the cycle of,
hey, we're doing what you were talking about, by the way, saving up our own money, buying deals. Go ahead.
It's exactly that. So we save up to 30 to 50 grand each, right? And then we're like, okay, let's drop it in a deal. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. We got one deal. And then you got to wait 6 to 8 months again. Cool. You get two deals. Like, how the hell do you scale that? And I think, and people keep saying, oh, you just got to do a private money deal. Can you give us a recommendation of a specific, like what you would recommend to people in this cycle, like how to structure the deal so that it's still like equitable for us, that we're like, okay, it's worth us giving up a chunk of money for X amount of years to this person. And just maybe like, even if it's super elementary, we can't quite wrap our heads around it yet. Haven't done enough research into it, but we're just getting stressed.
Here's the most important thing to understand. Ryan, you're thinking about like this deal, how much equity do I have to give up on this deal, and how much we're going to pay the investor on this deal. I don't give a shit about this deal. I care about what does this deal set me up for the next 50 deals, the next 100 deals, the next 2,000 deals, right? And that's always been my mindset. Like, I'm not worried about this deal. I will take short-term sacrifices for that long-term gain, right? I would rather see you have a win with one private money lender and make it a no-brainer for somebody to invest money with you. So that way you can go through the cycle, and then you can go to 10 other private money lenders and be like, hey, here's a testimonial from John, who just invested $100,000 with me, and I got him his money back in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. John, can you say some good things about us? And then all of a sudden that sets you up with all these other private money lenders, right? You've been through the cycle, you've been through a deal, and now you can go take down 5 deals with each of these other 10 private money lenders. So if I'm in your shoes, and I'm, let's say you drop me in the middle of somewhere that I've never been before. I don't have any money. I don't have any connections. I don't have any resources. First thing that I would do is probably plug into like a local real estate investors association, meet up, something along those lines, and just get inside the circle, the network of people in that community who are out there doing deals. And there's really only 2 things that matter in real estate. Well, really 3, but first is finding deals. 2 is finding money. And 3 is either selling, whatever your dispo side is, either selling deals or refining your operations, right? If you're not doing those 3 things at all times, you're not doing real estate, or you're wasting your friggin' time doing stuff that doesn't actually generate revenue. Find deals, find money, and refine your operations or sell your properties, whatever your business model is. And you guys, I don't know if you've ever been through this cycle, but my cycle when I was doing the flipping stuff was like, we run all this marketing. We get all this deal flow coming in. We contract all these properties. I'd be like, shit, stop the marketing, right? Like, don't do any more of that. So we had too many deals on our plate, and we'd take down all these deals and we'd renovate them. And then we'd have them all under contract to sell. And I'd be like, all right, what's next? And we wouldn't have any deals in the pipeline. And then we'd have these feast and famine cycles in our business because we stopped always looking for deals. So one of the things, I don't care how many deals you got in the pipeline, you got to be always marketing for deals. And I don't care how much money you have access to, you need to be always sourcing money as well. What does that conversation look like? It looks like, hey, I'm looking to buy some real estate. Who's interested in investing in real estate? If I could give you a mortgage, a promissory note, and a mortgage promissory note, and add you to the insurance, and I'll pay you a fixed return on your investment. Who's interested in that? Dude, you could, if you're going to secure it with an actual mortgage, you can offer that on social media, right? Like, you guys have a great social media following. If you're going to syndicate and bring 2 people into a deal and create a security, that's when you need SEC paperwork and all that stuff.
Got it,
You cannot go out and just solicit on that. So let's talk about first, like a mortgage, right? If I'm raising money from a mortgage, you got to realize, what is the investor looking for? What is a private money lender looking for? They're looking for essentially, they're asking themselves 3 questions. Is the reward worth the risk, right? Meaning, what does the return look like, right? Is the reward worth the risk? And you guys have experience, so it shouldn't be too risky, right? Like, it's not like it's your first deal. And you also have to pay attention, though, is like, what other options do they have, right? Like, what's their opportunity cost to invest with you versus investing in something else? And why would they want to invest with you? The other thing is like, what is it secured by? And real estate's easy, right? Everybody drives by real estate. People know real estate. They watch HGTV. So it's not difficult of like, what is the asset? They know what the asset is. That's easy to get past. What is the return? Well, is the reward worth the risk? That's what they're asking themselves. And then the next thing is like who is the borrower and the credibility of the borrower? And does this person have the fortitude to repay me my money? You know what I mean? Like, that's what they're asking themselves. So you got to get through all those different things. Once you can do that, then you have to realize there's essentially 2 ways for people to invest in deals. They can either invest as a debt lender and say, hey, let me give you a loan on this single family house, $100,000. I'm going to lend you $100,000 on it to buy it, renovate it, whatever. Now it's going to be worth $150 or whatever the numbers are. And you're going to pay me 10% of my money. and, have me paid back in 12 months, right? And so it's very predictable cash flow to the investor, which is a debt loan. And if you default, they take the property back and whatever. So on something like that, they get the predictability, but they don't get any upside or downside, right? If you sell it for $80,000 and you take a bath for 20 grand, that comes out of your pocket, not the investor. You still owe them 100 G's plus their 10%. If you make $270,000 on this thing, all that money goes into your pocket. The investor doesn't get any of that upside. So it's good because it's predictable when they lend you on a debt perspective, but they don't have the upside, right? The other option is kind of like the turnkey. Or hang on. Let me back up. It's an equity investor, right? So an equity investor is like those guys that partnered up with me initially. They said, hey, we'll put up the money, but we want 67% of all the upside. But they also have 67% of all the downside, right? But they don't have any predictability on their money. There's no cash flow coming in on a regular basis being distributed. So they're there for the ride, but they're missing some of that predictability. Some people like the predictability, right? If they're retired and they just want stable cash flow, they might just want debt. If they're, maybe just starting their journey and they came into it and they have more risk tolerant, maybe they're willing to do that just equity. Or what I've learned is I create kind of a hybrid of the two of them. I learned this from kind of like turnkey, right? The reason the whole turnkey space even exists is because there's people who don't want to do any of the work. They want predictable cash flow and they want equity upside. Right? That's the whole turnkey environment. You could also offer that to your investors. You could say, hey, what if we did this? You lend me $100,000 on this house. Here's the plan. I'm going to buy it, renovate it, rent it, and then I'm going to refinance it. And at that time, I'm going to give you all your money back, and or I'm going to sell it. Let's say you're going to sell it. Let's do that. I'm going to buy it, renovate it, and then sell it. I'll do this. Ryan, how about I pay you 10% return on your investment or 15% of the profits, whichever is more? How's that sound? It's a pretty damn good way of structuring it, right? Absolutely. If I'm a private money lender, I'm like, dude, I have no downside and I have upside where, if they make a bunch of money on this thing, I'm able to, get a better return than 10%. But 10% is my worst case scenario. That's a pretty cool way of structuring it. Now, if you're going to buy and hold something and you want to, like what I do with my apartment buildings, the way that I structure it with my investors is they'll invest. So I'll go and get. Now I syndicate, right? They don't give me the entire lump sum because on a $10 million building, I'd have to go raise $10 million. Instead, it's very easy to go to a bank to get $8 million. And then I just go and raise $2 million. That typically comes from many different people. It's not just one person stroking a check for $2 million. It could be 20 people at $100,000 a piece. This is when the SEC and syndication stuff comes into play. So there's a lot more legal paperwork and some things that you got to pay attention to in order to stay compliant with that. But it's not as convoluted and complex and scary as we all make it up to be in our heads. But what I do is I'll go and get a mortgage, and then I'll syndicate and bring in those investors into my deal. Now they cannot have a mortgage on the property because there's already a mortgage on the property, and that first lien holder will not allow a second lien on the property. So I secure my investors with equity in the LLC. So if I own 123 Main Street, I'm going to create a new LLC that is just to hold 123 Main Street. I'm going to call it 123 Main Street LLC. And those investors are going to own a percentage of that 123 Main Street LLC. You guys following me so far?
Yes, absolutely.
And then what I do is I pay them a predictable return. Most indicators don't do this. I just do it a little bit differently because I'm buying distressed properties. I'm fixing them up. It's a very predictable cycle and a very, very predictable timeline for me. So I'm able to raise that capital and I'm able to say, hey, let me pay you 8% on your money. Regardless of the property's performance, I'm going to pay you 8% on your money. So on that $2 million that I'm raising, we're going to pay $160,000 a year on it. And over the course of 12 to 24 months, we'll get that property fully stabilized, meaning fully renovated, rented at market rate, good management in place, and collecting over 90% of the gross potential rents, right? Like that's what stabilized means. Then I can go back to another bank and refinance it. Now that property that I bought for 10 million is now worth, $15 million. Okay. They're willing to give me a 70% LTV loan, which is $10,500,000. So when I go and refinance, I'm able to then get a new loan at $10,500,000. I'm only into it for $10 million. I pay 8 million of it back to the acquisition financing. I pay 2 million back to my investors. And then there's about $500,000 that I'm able to carve up amongst me and any of our partners of tax-free refinance proceeds. Now, although my investors are paid back, right, they earned a predictable 8% on their money, I still keep them in for equity forever. So I let them have that equity for as long as we own the building. And that might be 20% of the deal or something carved up. So everybody owns like 1% and everybody gets 1%. But guess what? They got 1% of a $15 million asset.
Yeah, it's
right. And so they have 1% of the cash flows, 1% of the refinance proceeds, 1% of the depreciation that offsets all those cash flows, 1% of any future sales proceeds. So if we go and turned around and sold this building tomorrow for $15 million and made $5 million, they'd get an extra $50,000 on top of the 8% that they made on their $100,000 investment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was a great explanation. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I have a couple. First one on this specifically is when you say, okay, if we're going to, maybe we sell this down the line at a certain point, I'm thinking if you have like 15 investors in one deal and everyone has their own lives and things, lines can get crossed. How do you structure the deal?
I'm 100% decision maker. I'm not going to let some, I love my doctor friends and my engineer friends and my entrepreneur friends who are selling sunglasses and shit, but they don't know anything about real estate, right? I would never go into their business and try telling them what to do. They can passively invest, but I am 100% the decision maker because I'm the full-time real estate professional. I've been in this game for a long time and I understand market cycles and I understand, forecasting and I understand cash flows and I understand, when it's a hot time to sell and when it's the best time to refinance or hold. And so I get to make that decision exclusively.
Very cool. I like that. Can you give us an example of this? I'm sorry to elementary, bring it back down to our level here with the single family and the multifamily. Can you give us an example of someone like an equity deal where, in almost putting it in the LLC, right? Like someone to do it on maybe let's call it a duplex or a fourplex. Mm-hmm. And we just want to have one person lending us the cash for that deal. Yeah. I'm thinking of a specific deal that we currently have, and I'll give you some rough numbers here. And we're trying to figure out how to make it work. The only problem is it's a single family home. And then it also has I guess, what do you want to call the unit on the outside?
It's an 80. It was a bar. It's not really it is kind of a single family home, but there's a barbershop attached to it. So it's technically commercially zoned. And then there's a garage on the other side of it too.
Yep. And the deal's probably the asking price was 230,000. And then we think that we're going to have to put probably about 60 to 70 into it. Right. And we're thinking it's probably going to be worth 310. So it's not a huge equity play in the beginning, but we think long-term it'll go up. And it honestly, by the looks of cash flow, we could be between, I don't know, 500 and
$500 to $600, maybe even a little bit more. But it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, on a deal like this, it sounds like the best way to source money and get private deals is if you kind of need to have that equity jump from the value add. Would that be correct or not necessarily?
No, I mean, you can go buy something at retail price, right? You're into a $300,000 deal for $300,000. It just needs to be juicy enough to create the return, right? Is the reward worth the risk for that investor? And so, when you go to somebody and you're like, hey, we're buying this thing for 300 grand, or it's going to be worth 310. All of a sudden they're like, well, why would I invest in that? Well, and you got to figure out why does it make sense to go do that? So on this deal, tell me, how have you guys raised money in the past? Do you guys just go and get your own loans right now from the bank and then use your own cash, right?
Yep, exactly.
So that's the only way we've done it through 7 units.
So you've never even raised hard money in order to just buy a house in order to fix it up and then sell it?
Never done that.
Nope. Not yet.
Okay. I mean, first thing you could do is just Google search hard money lenders, Philadelphia, right? See who pops up. Start picking up the phone. Hey man, I've done 7 deals. I'm looking to do a bunch more. I guess a great deal flow, and there's a lot of hard money lenders with a lot of cash that they cannot deploy right now because there's deal flow's tight,
Yep.
So if you just Google search whatever your town is and hard money lenders, some people will pop up. So I would go to them and say, hey, listen, I can go and get the loan on this deal. And the bank that I've worked with on these other 7 deals is willing to give me, what do you guys get? 75, 80% loan to value?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's say 80%, right? So you can get $240,000 from the bank. You need essentially $60,000 down. Now, single family is a little bit different than multifamily, right? Single family, They want to see the money in your bank account. They want to see it seasoned for 3 months.
Yep.
It needs to be your money, blah, blah, all this other garbage. In commercial, dude, it's expected that you're bringing outside people's money to do a deal.
Got it. Yeah.
They don't expect me to have the money. They want me to be liquid enough to sign on the loan, essentially to have about 10% of the loan amount in liquidity in my own bank account. But they don't expect me to be the one who's actually bringing the cash. They know that it's going to be sourced from outside investors. So I don't know how to navigate that on the single family side because I just haven't done that. I've done a lot of seller finance deals on single family, like the island that I just bought, the big ass mountain estate that I bought. I got both of those seller financed, and then I syndicated it because it was a single family house technically. And I didn't want to go and deal with a single family bank for that reason. And I wanted to syndicate capital for my investors. So you could talk to your bank and say, hey man, I'm looking to bring in a private money lender partner. Can he be passive and not have to sign on the loan? Single family, he might still have to, I'm not sure. But anyways, let me give you the overall framework, and then you're going to have to go figure out like some of the details with your bank based on if they let you do it. But essentially, I would go to the bank, get them to give me $240,000, which is 80%. I'd go and raise $60,000 from a hard money lender. And I would tell them, hey, this is a long-term appreciation play. You can see the area that it's in. It's growing like crazy. I think rents are going to grow substantially here. And as you can see, with a bank loan at 3.5% right now on majority of the money, this thing's going to yield an 8% return on our investment or something. I don't know what the numbers are, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So let's call it $24,000 a year, and your debt is only $10,000 a year. That means you have like 14 grand in actual cash flow of a spread. Does that make sense? You guys following me so far?
Yep, totally.
14 grand. You can go to your investor and say, hey, I'll pay you 10% a year on that, right? So you get the first $6,000 in cash flow. It comes to you. It's called a preferred return. You get the first 6 grand. So you're making 10%. And then everything above that, let's split it 3 ways, right? So you guys each get a third, and your private money lender gets a third. And so now that there's another $8,000 on top of that, you guys didn't have to bring any of your own money, but you guys are each making them about $2,700, right? So you're each making about a little over $200 a month. And then your investor makes another $2,700 on top of the $6,000 that they're making. So he's really getting almost 9 G's. He's making like a 14% return on his money. And he's got 33% of equity in that property. So if you guys do sell it for 400 grand in the future, he not only gets his 60 grand back, but he's going to get another $33,000, a third of the $100,000 profits that was created.
Very cool. That's perfectly explained. And I think that it's just good to hear that there's so much creativity in this game. And like, you just have to kind of put this together in your mind first, and then you can go out and actually execute. So I think it's
just getting it and doing it, right? We talked about, we were scared to do or not, I guess if you want to call it scared, whatever. We were just like apprehensive to do our first rehab. We're like, this is going to be a lot. We've just never done it. And then you do it and you're like, all right, it wasn't that bad. You just figure it out. And then you learn things you won't do the next time. And even going through your first almost turnkey rental property, like, okay, that was simple compared to what we just did. Yeah. And then going into one of these deals, it's just like playing around.
Isn't it always that though, Ryan? It's always the bullshit stories that we make up in our own head are always way worse than what it actually is, right? Like, having a bad conversation with your spouse or having oh, this is going to blow up. And then you realize like, damn, I should have not let this pent up anger or whatever, right? Or something like that. Starting a new business venture, so getting into a real estate deal. You're like, it's going to be horrible and tenants going to tear my and you're like, no, they really didn't, right? It was. Yeah. We always make it worse in our head than it actually is.
Yeah, we just had this conversation. So we just rented a unit, and we can give some details here. We bought this property for $135,000, put $60,000 into it. So we're all in for $195,000. It appraised for $226,000. So we got a little equity. That's cool. It's a single family home. So on our mortgage, we're paying $1,500 a month. And we're like, let's go high and try to get $2,500 a month on this. We got bombarded, my man. I mean, really? Yeah. And I was like, because I think we did a pretty good rehab. Like, it's not an A+ because it was our first, but we did a good job. So we ended up locking somebody in for 2 years at $2,700 a month, awesome. Which was great. Yeah, it was great. I mean, we're going to make, I think conservatively $700-800 a month on it, with everything taken out, all of our expenses.
and we're getting blown up by our new tenant. Like, just like, we need this and we need that and we need this. And we're like, we need to have a conversation with this lady. And as soon as we ripped the Band-Aid off, because we thought this was going to go on forever, as soon as we ripped that Band-Aid off and just said, let's just have this conversation, Ryan and I we like to think that we're pretty personal and we just create good connections. She was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't realize I was doing this. Like, I didn't realize I was being crazy. I didn't realize that I was texting you at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. And we're like, we have office hours. Like, so once we put those processes in place and ripped that off, it ended up not being as bad as we
like
thought.
4 days of text back and forth, like exactly how we should structure the text to her and all this stuff.
We were just overthinking it.
Then he's like, dude, let's just get on the phone. I'm like, oh yeah, let's just get on the phone. No problem. So we had a 3-way call and it was the easiest call I've ever had in my whole life. Thinking it was, we just, like you said, you build it up in your head and you get this fear of that something's going to go wrong. And probably 90% of the time it goes way better than you think. So
always, man. It always is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I just wanted to bring that up. I thought that was
it's just funny.
No, you're 100% on point.
Yeah. And Tim's probably thinking, wow, I remember when I used to like stress about like little tenant issues. And it's like, it's all levels to it, you know?
Dude, it's expectation setting though. Everything in life is about setting expectations, right? With your team, with your tenants, with your contractors, and with your joint venture partners, right? It's like addressing those things earlier on. And a lot of the expectations like might be common sense to you and me because we're in the business, but it might not be common sense to somebody who's just kind of coming into our world of as a tenant or as a contractor or whatever, because it's not how they've done business in the past. So like, it's just setting those expectations. And, and I think you just, once now you've done it, now you have a standard procedure and a probably a note to tell the tenants that says, hey, we have office hours during these times. Feel free to send us an email. We will address it within 48 hours. Like, dude,
exactly
okay, great. Like I didn't have that earlier on either. And then finally, when that happened to me and people start bombarding me with calls, I was like, I got to funnel this into like, to be able to batch this activity. And that way I don't have to just takes me away from everything all the time.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's just, dude, I told you guys before we even started this podcast, I was horrible at real estate for the first 7 or 8 years, right? Trying to figure out everything. And then all of a sudden it just, I did it enough, or I went through enough deals. I went through enough volume and, got burned by enough contractors, got screwed by enough tenants, had enough private money lenders bail on me the day before closing, had, like bad business partnerships, bad employees, me being a bad employer, like all of it, man. I went through all of it in the first like 7, 8 years. And then finally it just kind of clicked because I learned from it all. Right. And I had better standard operating procedures and checklists in place. And I was setting better expectations. I was training my team instead of just saying go. Right. And, I think it just comes with time, right? It's like, you cannot be an expert at anything unless you've done it for 10,000 hours.
I hear that all the time. 5 years,
statistic.
Right? Like 5 years at 40 hours.
Full time at 40 hours a week, right? So if you're doing it full time, 40 hours a week, and you're actually doing the activities, right? Not making friggin' business cards, not, updating your website, not like doing the noise activities. I'm talking the activities that actually matter. Finding deals, finding money, and refining your operations or dispo or whatever it is. If you're doing those 3 things for 10,000 hours, dude, you're going to be a friggin' ninja, an unstoppable warrior at investing in real estate.
It's awesome. Just to hear, like, we're so young in general. I mean, we're, 30, 29, but like, just like into the real estate game. I'm about 3 or 4 years in, Ride's like 2, 3 years in. And it's like, you didn't even get good at this until 8 years. And we're like, we're like a third into that. So it's just it's cool because we do feel like we're doing good, but who knows what the future can hold just by sticking through it and learning over and over again. So
dude, I pressed the reset button when I was 31 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Like you guys are way ahead. I was living with my parents when I was 2 years younger than you, right? Because I was so broke. So guess what? Like, it's amazing, dude. If you just put your head down and you focus on those actual activities that matter. And you guys are doing an awesome job, with the podcast. That's going to lead to deal flow. It's going to lead to money flow. I mean, for anybody who's watching this, you should reach out to Corey and Ryan about lending private money, right? Like, talk to them about it. They're obviously doing deals. Tell them that you're interested and see if there's some deals that can be made, right? Maybe you can get some equity. Maybe you can get a fixed return and check both of those boxes for you personally. And then you could help these guys get into more deals. And all of a sudden you're building wealth together, right? It's a value add for everybody. And so Again, you guys are doing all the right things. Just keep your head down, man. Don't look left. Don't look right. There's a lot of shiny objects out there right now.
Yeah.
Don't do, the Amazon stores and the cryptocurrency and everything else. I can assure you, like, there's highs and lows in a lot of that stuff, and you can make some money doing it. But I don't know if anything more time tested than real estate, right? It has been how wealth has been measured since the beginning of civilization. And it has tax advantages that none of those other ones have. It has tangible assets. It has depreciation. It has appreciation. It has cash flow. Like, if you guys just stick to this, I can assure you, you're going to be worth tens of millions of dollars each over the course of the next 5 years.
I'm ready to go. Let's do it. I'm ready to go.
Got a brick wall anywhere here? I'm about to friggin' run through that thing. Thank you. That's amazing. Yeah. I want to, you touched on it really, really quickly here. What you're jacked.
I was looking for the brick wall.
He's all jacked up here. You touched on standard operating procedures and systems. I want to dive in there a little bit. And I know you've probably refined this over years and years, but people always ask us, there's like, hey, what resources do you have? Like, where should I do to get started? And like, we've sort of found like, okay, you can give someone the book and like, maybe they'll read it, like, but unless you take super detailed notes and then you go take action, nothing's going to happen. It's kind of like the basis of this whole episode. Right. But I'm wondering if you have any like insight to the systems and like how you've streamlined your business over time, and like little tips and tricks that maybe you could give to listeners that they could just explore, right? And then potentially implement into their lives.
Yeah. I mean, my lease initially was 1 page. I was like, let's just keep it simple, right? Like, here's the lease, here's the deposit, and that's it. And then if tenants burn you where you're like, oh, you know what? I don't want people flushing tampons down my toilet anymore. Let's add that to the lease. Or, flushing toys down the toilet, or, locking themselves out of the house. And I have to then send a locksmith on a Saturday night at, 2:00 in the morning and pay them $350 to get back in the, like, guess what? That wasn't in the lease, that was on the tenant. So I had to pay for that early on. And you start adding all these things. Now my lease is like 7 pages long, right? So, could you get with an attorney? Could you get to, goes back to what I said before. If you want to shortcut it, there's 2 ways to get the shortcut. One is doing it the way that I did, which was just getting punched in the face and punched in the gut and knocked down over and over and over and over again, and learning it through that way, right? That was the first 7-8 years. It wasn't until 2015 when I joined a mastermind group where all of a sudden now I was like, guess what? I can shortcut this, because I can learn from other people's mistakes and other people's insights, and the resources and connections that they've developed over the past 20 years of their business career are now accessible to me because I know them through a mastermind and they can vouch for me. And now I have access to all this private money. That's how I got access to big money, is all through masterminds and the relationships that were developed through those masterminds. That's what took my trajectory from steadily growing to then astronomically into outer space, right?
That's like such a next step for us. Like, it's the same thing with masterminds and coaching, where I think people are like, I don't want to pay this money. Like, and then as soon as
you're going to pay for it one way or another. You're either going to pay for it and getting kicked in the balls and losing money and all this other stuff and time, or you're going to pay for it by just stroking a check with a mastermind. It's going to fast track you. It's going to be way less painful. And it's going to be way faster if you just do it that way. But it's hard for people because they're like, oh, it's an expense. I promise you it is an investment if you join the right one, right? There are some that are okay, and there's some that are hugely valuable. But
that's what I was going to ask you really quick, because I read oh my god, I can't forget the name of it. It's awesome, but basically it's based around this mastermind, Go Abundance, and it's one of my favorites. Is that the one you're part of, or are you part of another?
No, I'm not in Go Abundance. I know a bunch of guys in Go Abundance. That's a good one.
Okay, cool.
There's a bunch of really good guys that I know in that one.
Awesome. How does one vet? It's called The Tribe of Millionaires. There you go. I love that book, and we know a couple of people in Go Abundance, and they're great. And it's cool to hear from you, who's and also a different one that you vouch for them. Can you maybe give us? I'm in 5 masterminds, and I run 5. 2. I'm in 5 masterminds, and I have 2 that I run. That's how much I believe in masterminds. Dude, how do you vet them, and how do you get involved? Can you give us like a little peek behind the curtain?
Yeah, it's birds of a feather flock together, right? So look at the leader. Look at the leader of the mastermind. I wouldn't. If it's a member that's been there for longer than 3 years, you can look at them also. All right. There's a lot of transactional people who join a mastermind and they jump out after a year, and they're very like trying to take.
Yeah. Right. Got it.
And that's okay if that's your MO, but you're not going to get a good indication of what is the mastermind if you just look at that one individual. I would look at the leader of the mastermind or somebody who's been there for at least 3 years and see what their character level is, see what their core values are, see what they do, and if they are where you want to be. That's the kind of mastermind that I would look at.
Cool. Really like it.
And dude, there's some that are e-commerce. There's some that are, and I'm in an e-commerce one because I raise a ton of money from that. There's a bunch of guys who know how to make money and they don't know how to deploy it. Right. So they're like, Tim's a real estate guy. Let me go invest with Tim. I'm in a single family mastermind because even though I don't do single family, I'm in one because I send my team out there. And we get a lot of students from it and we get a lot of deal flow from it because it's single family guys who don't know how to underwrite a 100-unit apartment building. They send it to us or they invest, right? They're making a lot of money and they need depreciation. So they invest in one of our deals and we give them depreciation. And that's a cool reason that we're in that. And we get some good strategies and techniques and stuff on the single family side for acquisitions and all that we can implement into the multifamily side. I'm in a multifamily mastermind where I'm just understanding and surrounding myself with other multifamily people. I'm in a marketing mastermind that's all about, email marketing, podcasting, building your influence, social media marketing, all that kind of stuff. I'm in, I am such a believer in masterminds. Like I try to, it's not that I go broke, but I need to spend minimum $100,000 a year in masterminds because I know that it's not a 10x return, dude. It's not like a 10% return or a 50% return. It is like a 10x return every mastermind that I'm in.
It's so cool to hear because I think we talked to Steve Rosenberg, who I don't know if you've connected with him or came across him in any way. And he preaches like coaching and masterminds and that type of stuff. And he said he's a great guy. Yeah, he is a great guy. And most people talk about like, well, we've had coaches for all the sports we've played. We're sports guys. We've had teachers our entire life. And then I said it in that past episode, in the most important game that we play, most people don't have that mastermind, that coaching, that teaching, including us right now. So it's like, but it just, the more really, really intelligent, wealthy, smart people like you that we talk to, it's just so much more evident that every day that like that is the next phase in order for us to go on that bell curve up the way that you were talking about. So I just wanted to bring that up. So very cool.
Yeah, man. Got to.
So we want to just talk about your company and then how you just talk a little bit about what you do. And then also Little Legacy Library, which is these children's books for kids, I think is really cool what you're doing. I was doing some research on you and I was like, I don't know anybody else that's doing something quite like this. And I just think it's really like you're shaping the future people of our world. It's awesome.
Yeah. Do you guys have kids?
No.
I'm probably gonna be next. I mean, I definitely am. I'm catching up to you in age, dude. I'm getting pressed. So, but I actually know nothing about this, so I'm intrigued to this. I've always thought there's a niche for what they don't teach you in school. And to put it, and I'm guessing this is what you put into a children's book for the future. Am I wrong?
Yep. No, it's, so like I told you guys before, I am all into like personal development. I read a lot of the books and it was like, listening to all the audio books and stuff. And as I was just kind of becoming an entrepreneur and trying to get my mind straight, I think that's one of the things that is always in everybody's bottleneck is their own mindset. It's themselves. It's always ourselves. And so like, you just got to get yourself out of your own way. And a lot of the personal development, the mindset stuff is what helped me get out of my own way. And so, I remember it was like 2017 or something. I was coming back from a mastermind event. I was down in Palm Beach, Florida. I was with, 20 people sitting in a room talking about business and life and concepts and, mindset and all this stuff. And I'm on the flight on the way back to Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm reading The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And as I'm reading this book, I was in the what is it, the prologue, like the very beginning? Is that what it's called? And I'm reading the prologue and it's just like I'm 5 pages in. I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, these are such good principles. These are so like, and I was 31 at the time, already been through like 10 years of personal development stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, can you imagine if I got this when I was 21?
Yeah.
What if I got this when I was 15? What if I got this when I was 5, right? Like when you've heard all these studies, like the most, malleable and where kids' personality and mindset and everything is developed is in the first like 5 or 6 years of their life.
Yep. And
I'm thinking like, man, and I had a 2-year-old, my daughter was about to be, or had just turned 2, or was about 2. And I'm like, I need to get these principles into her, right, at this young age. So that way she doesn't even know any better, right? She just grows up with these achievement philosophies and these success principles and these ideologies that I had to relearn and delete a lot of the garbage that they taught me in school in order to reprogram myself, right? What if this was programmed the right way from the very beginning? And I sat on the idea for like 2 years and finally started writing the books in like 2019. Partnered up with one of my best female friends from high school, my wife, and the three of us started a partnership. And the girls wrote the books. I just handled the business development side of things. That's why I sat on it for 2 years, because I didn't have time to write the books. And so they handled that. And we essentially grabbed 5 books that are 5 of the most impactful books that I've ever read, which is Think and Grow Rich, The Richest Man in Babylon, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Power of Positive Thinking, and The Magic of Thinking Big. So those 5 books, we've created children's versions of each of those books. So we have, our first book was Think Big and Go to Baseball Camp, based on Think and Grow Rich. Yeah. And it's all about, essentially setting a goal and obsessing over that goal. And thinking about that goal and looking at it every single day and sacrificing things that you really like and you really care about for things you deeply desire, right? And things that you just have a burning passion and burning desire to achieve, and sacrificing, the kids sacrificed going to birthday parties and going to the swimming pool because he was set on his long-term goal and he had to work during those days and blah, blah, blah. And then not only having success yourself, but also sharing it with your friends, and how do you like lift others up as well, and deal with adversity and deal with all that kind of stuff and the obstacles that come with it. And then, essentially achieving your goal by the end of the book. So they're kids' books. They're for the ages of like 4 to 10, as what I would say. They're all illustrated, and although they're kids' books, I've had a lot of my entrepreneur friends buy them for their kids and shoot me a message like, "Hey, dude, don't tell anybody, but like I got a lot out of that book."
Yeah, chapter 3. Chapter 3 was fire.
Pretty much, we should start reading those.
No, it's funny because I could not agree with you more. And to understand this and find this, it just kind of shows how smart you are, like that idea. Because it's like how much of who you become in your 20s is shaped in that small period of time, whether it stems from who your parents are, how they raise you, like who your friends are, and to put something into a children's book in somebody's mind that early, it's like, who knows what they're capable of once you do that. When you learn when you're 30, it's hard. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, and you have to reinvent yourself and start over. And you have these ways that you've already see the world, preconceived notions. And so I think I love it. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, man. We have like a talk and take action. So like the parent can sit with their kid and talk through some of the ideas and strategies, and they can set their own goals. And I've had a bunch of my buddies whose kids have started like pressure washing boat companies, right? And grass cutting businesses and lemonade stands and all that kind of stuff. And so like, it's really cool to see the impact. And these kids, there's one girl who makes bath bombs, and she like crushes it, does like tens of thousands of dollars a year and she's crazy 7 or 8 years old. And you're like, holy smokes, right? And she's making them in her house, and she's selling these bath bombs for $2 a piece. And it's like, man, this is like powerful. And it's really cool to be, involved in that and be kind of like a little bit of a spark that gets that going.
Well, it's working clearly,
yeah.
It's really cool.
Creating the entrepreneurs of tomorrow.
I think that's so important.
Speaking of entreprenures of tomorrow,
oh,
hi to everybody
there. Heard you're pretty famous. Well, you are now. That's awesome.
Man.
So mine's a little bit different. I don't want to, I hate like changing up from this, because this is that was awesome, by the way. Thanks for diving.
What's your daughter's name?
Penelope.
Love it. So cute.
Hi, Penelope.
So we've heard like, okay, you think of 2008 and it's just like the big dig, right? Like everything bad happened, and the deals, like no one's lending money, and like it just, there's a preconceived notion of like, that was one of the worst times ever. Right. But there still were people that were successful in real estate at that time. Now I'm fast forwarding to now. And we kind of talked about in the beginning, like everybody's like, oh, there's no deals out there, but there's so much money going around. So this could be one of those other times that's just like a really real high. And then you talk about a really real low. I'm wondering if you can talk about people that found success in both times, or like how people can find success in both times, because I think a lot of people give up too fast and they're like, Well, no, it's just one of those cycles. And like, I'm just going to wait it out to the next one. They wait it out. They never do it. So I'm just thinking about like, clearly you probably have people in your network that were successful in 2008 and like, what did they do and not do? And then what are you seeing today? Like, what should people do to find success in real estate? And I don't know if it's going to be too all over the place there, but I just think the high and low kind of thing, it's interesting where we're at.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think that you got to realize, man, there's always opportunity and there's always obstacles. Those two things exist all the time. I don't care how good the economy is. There's people struggling right now, right? And just like back in 2008, 2009, everybody's saying run from real estate. Those were just the people who were losing money, right? On TV, they were just showing people who were losing money because that's what people like watching train wrecks. They like watching, you know, cars burn, right? They like that's entertaining for them. Just as many people, like there were fortunes made. I know people who went down to the, remember when I first started getting involved in real estate, it was 2009, right? Like investing myself. And I'd go down to the actual courthouse steps where they were actually auctioning off things. And there was one dude who he understood business, right? He knew business and he knew cash flow businesses. And he had a patent on, I think he actually had the patent on like spray foam insulation, sold that, made a boatload of money, 100, 200, 400 million. I don't even know. And moved down to Charleston. He's from Ohio, moved down to Charleston, South Carolina. And he would be sitting there along with his little computer analyzer guy who would just be running numbers and looking up properties nonstop at the auction steps. And then this guy invested in a bunch of like hard money loaner or hard money, like pawn shops and stuff, and had a bunch of other businesses. And then when the market pivoted, dude, he just sat down at the courthouse steps and every house that got auctioned off, dude, and he bought probably $100 million of real estate in 2009, 2010, 2011. That is today worth probably $500 million. Like he bought everything. The guy's got to be a billionaire, but he's privately owned, you know, so he's not going to show up on Forbes or anything like that. But guess what? There's people out there, right? When banks aren't lending money to anybody, guess what? That's what banks do. They got to be lending money to somebody. They were only lending it to the people who had balance sheets, who were good stewards of capital, who had assets that were cash flowing, right? And that's some of the things that you got to look out for. One, you know, don't pay. And I say this tongue in cheek because, you know, I've always bought things at a wholesale price because that's the world that I came from. Today, it's a little bit different. If you can creatively structure it, you can pay a retail price as long as you're not backing yourself into a corner. But typically I say, hey, always buy at a wholesale price, always buy at a discount. Second thing is never speculate on appreciation, right? Don't buy just banking on appreciation. I create appreciation. I buy value add projects so that way I can buy it. I create the appreciation by putting sweat equity into my deals. So I create appreciation. If I get natural appreciation on top of it, dude, it's cherry on top, right? But I would never buy a deal saying, hey, I think eventually, this parcel over here off the freeway is going to, be worth way more money. Like I would never do a deal like that. Speculative land plays are like the worst. Buy for cash flow. That's another one. I think if you can buy for cash flow, that is like the safest thing that you could possibly do. It is, if it'll cash flow, everything else will fall into place. You can hold on to the property if shit hits the fan. You can sell it at a retail price. You can sell it at a discounted price. You can refinance it at your basis. You can refinance it above your basis. You can do a lease option and sell it off and get, like, there's so many different things that you can do if the property cash flows, where at least it's covering your debt service, at least it's covering your operating expenses, and it's putting a couple bucks in your pocket. You can ride out any sort of economic storm that occurs if the property cash flows. I don't flip. I
love it.
I only buy for cash flow.
I love it.
Putting good financing terms in place, right? Like making sure that your bank loans, a lot of people who weren't doing anything poorly, right? And they had great deals, great properties that were cash flowing and performing. And the banks just got spooked that they didn't want any more single family real estate in the portfolio. And they started calling all these loans due that were performing back then. And you're like, how the hell is that possible if the loans? Well, there's a stipulation in there that allowed them to call it due at any time for any reason. You had to pay it within 90 days. And if you couldn't, then they take the property back. And it makes no sense, but that was happening nonstop. And so like, I make sure that that clause isn't in any of the loans that I get, I get non-recourse financing, which doesn't really exist in the single family world. I don't personally guarantee the loans on my stabilized apartment buildings. Their only recourse against the loan going bad is taking that property back itself. They can't come after me or my cash or any of my other properties. So that's another thing, like putting good financing in place. Stress testing the numbers on all these deals, right? Like I see people right now trying to force deals to happen. Hell no, dude, that's the wrong thing. That's a wrong way to go. I try to kill deals. I put, if I can refinance at a 75% LTV loan, I'm going to put 70% in there, right? If I can get a 3.5% interest rate, I'm probably going to use 4.25 just in case. If I can get $800 a month in rent, I'm probably going to underwrite it at 750 just to be a little extra safer and pad the, give myself a little bit of cushion and all these different things. And if I can stress it in all these different areas of the financials and the deal still works, I tried to kill the deal and I couldn't kill it. That's when you know it's a good deal.
Yep. Very cool.
Right.
Love it.
So I'm doing that. And then it kind of goes back to if the property will cash flow, having multiple exit strategies. Right. Like if the more exit strategies you have, the better position you're going to be in. So it's like, dude, if we went golfing and we were playing a golf scramble, right? And there's the three of us and one other person, and we're taking best ball. Guess what, dude? If it's just me golfing and you're only using my ball, you only have one option. Chances are, because the quantity is not there, the quality is not going to be there either. Like you're going to be caught with your pants down at a couple different shots because I'm not a very good golfer. But guess what? I'm good for 1 or 2 good hits per hole.
Yep,
right.
Same.
So like same with you guys, so then all of a sudden the 4 of us, we have 4 different balls to take a look at. We can go with the best position, and quantity then leads to quality in that capacity. So I think, exit strategies is the same thing, where the more exit strategies you have, the more likely it is that you're going to make the most amount of money when you go to sell that property, and just going to put you in a better, safer position long-term. So if you're doing some of those things to kind of just mitigate the risk in your business, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Perfect. Thank you. That was awesome.
Cool. So we've made it to the second to last segment of our show, which is called the Core 4. And we kind of get to know you a little bit more personally, just ask you a couple, it's sort of rapid fire, but just some thinkers, just to make sure that, or just to get to know you on a deeper level here. So,
all right.
What is your favorite business, investing, or real estate book? And I know you've transformed some of your favorites probably into the children's books, but if you could pick one, what do you think?
It would be a book called 12 Pillars by Jim Rohn.
Never heard of it.
I love Jim Rohn. That's cool.
Dude, it is one of the most powerful books you'll ever read. It is so good. I read it every single year. My entire life philosophy is surrounded, encompassed by that book.
Wow. Okay. That's on my list.
Maybe
just jump to the top.
It's 100 pages. You'll read it in a day or 2.
Cool. Awesome.
Even further up your list.
Yeah.
100 pages.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. Thanks. Second question is, if you had an additional $50,000 right now, discretionary income, how would you use this and divvy it up into whether it's investments, spending, saving?
Join a mastermind. Join a mastermind, hands down. Not even a question.
Not even a question.
That was great.
Okay.
That was rapid.
I love it. Yeah.
Love it.
Ripping them out. Okay. So this is a good one. What has been your biggest mistake? You kind of shared some of them to us, for us, which I think is awesome. But what's been your biggest mistake in your investing journey, and how have you learned from it?
Biggest mistake in my investing journey. Not believing in myself sooner. I think we all go through this, and it's not like there's a bit of truth to it of you got to pay your dues, right? You got to do the work, you got to earn it. You got to, but dude, I was paying my dues for a long time, and I just didn't give myself enough self-worth to get out of shitty partnerships earlier, because I didn't believe that I could actually go and accomplish that, And then when the whole, dude, I didn't come up with coaching because I wanted to be a coach, although I love education, I love teaching, and I love the mentorship side of things of my business. It's actually the most fulfilling thing that I do. But I don't need to do that, right? I was just doing it because I liked sharing information on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. I was just posting all the time about deals, how I structured them, walking through, meeting the contractor, talking to my attorney, and just like it turned into like a bunch of people saying, "Hey man, do you mentor? Do you coach? Dude, this is amazing. Can you put an event together or something like that?" And it was like I had to wait for other people to tell me that I was then worthy, right? Before I told myself that I was worthy. And I think that was like something that I wish that I had figured out sooner, right? I remember golfing with a couple of my buddies and being like, dude, why the hell would anybody pay me to join a mastermind? Like, why would I ever? And they're like, dude, are you shitting me? Like, you have 400 units, like blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, but like that guy's got 2,000 units. Like, why wouldn't they just join his? He was like, dude, they can't relate to that guy, right? Like they can relate to picking up their first 100 units, but it's hard to relate to somebody who's got 5,000 or 10,000 doors. You know what I mean? Or that guy's 90 years old, right? And you're 30 years old.
There's always somebody who's like just above, 2 steps ahead of you. And that's the easiest relation is what you're saying too. So,
yeah, exactly. And that's the easiest to relate to, it's sometimes like I can't even conceive 5,000 units. So people don't even reach out to me, right? They reach out to me a lot more when I was going on this tear of picking up my first 1,000 apartments, 1,000 units. And, so I don't have as many people who reach out to me today because I don't know. I think it's because it's kind of like, it seems like it's too far out kind of a thing. But the reality is, dude, all I've done is I just pick up a 100-unit building over and over and over and over again. Like I did the exact same thing over and over and over again. Once you can do it with one, you could do it over and over and over and do the same thing. And just how many times can you do it then, But I think, to go back to your question though, it would be believing in myself, telling myself that I was worthy of actually receiving money and making money and building wealth instead of trying to wait for somebody else to say, hey, you're worthy, or, and you know what I mean? Like, yeah,
So
that
I know
that kind of held me back for a long time.
I know exactly what you're saying. I think limiting beliefs and things like that. Like we talked a lot about mentality throughout the whole episode. So that's a really good one.
Yeah. Fourth one.
Last question on the core 4 is, it's definitely more personal. But what do you want your legacy to be? So like, why are you doing this whole thing? I know you got your hands in so many different buckets and it almost seems like the train's never stopping. So.
Yeah, man. And, I mean, you guys know all my companies are named Legacy, right? Like I have, Legacy Lodge is my mountain estate. Legacy Island is my island. Legacy Wealth Holdings is my real estate holdings company. Little Legacy Library is my kids' books. Legacy Family and Legacy Boardroom are my 2 masterminds. And so I'm all about legacy. And I think a lot of people think, oh, legacy is like passing down property and passing down money and passing down estate and treasure to your kids. And like that has zero bounds or holds zero weight with me. I actually plan on not giving my kids anything other than a couple of key, awesome, houses, like the beach house, the mountain house, the island, and they'll have $20 million worth of real estate. So that's cool. But I'm planning on giving away everything else. To me, it would be like my kid, Penelope, that you just met, and my other guy's Hudson, he's 4, them coming up to me at like 20 years old and saying, you know what, Dad, I don't need your money because you taught me how to do it. You can give all your money away. I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to do it bigger than you even, like that would be really, really cool and be a big legacy piece to me. And not only for my kids, but for other people. I want to be the guy that people can borrow belief from. I'm a blue collar kid from Cleveland, Ohio, right? Like my dad was a cop. My mom was a stay-at-home mom with a teaching degree and just in PTA her whole life, right? Like that's cut from a blue collar cloth, right? In suburban Cleveland, Midwest. And so I want people to realize like, hey, if this kid can do it, like I can do it, right? And I want to not only like build a big business, but I want to be an example of what other people aspire, what like an awesome life could look like, right? Not that he's just in business, but I'm also spending time with my family all the time. I have my health dialed in. I'm working on my own personal mentality and spirituality and all that other kind of stuff too. All the time. And you're always leading with one of them. They're not always perfectly in balance. I think balance is BS, but I think harmony is very real. And just because you're leading in one or two of those pillars of your life doesn't mean you have to neglect the other ones. And so, hey, if I could be an example of what an awesome life, an exceptional life can look like, I think that would be like the greatest legacy that I could leave.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've made it to the last drop. And I think you kind of answered this actually, what your biggest mistake, but maybe you do have something to add. What, if you can go back, to maybe that 15, 16, 17-year-old Tim and give yourself, your younger self advice, what advice would you give?
Yeah, good question, man. I get like the 21-year-old Tim a lot, right? Like,
yeah, that's fine too.
But the teenage one, it's a different place in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're trying to chase girls, lose your virginity,
Right.
start on the basketball team.
That's pretty much all I thought about back then. So yeah, it's pretty good. That's literally it.
Every high school movie I ever saw.
Yeah. It's super bad was my life in high school. Like that movie was me and my friends. I think one of the greatest lessons that I didn't realize was like a lesson at the time was eliminate the bad out of your life. Just like a lot of people think, in order for me to be super successful, I have to add all this stuff to my life. That's important. You got to put good things onto your plate. But I think just as important, maybe even more important, is eliminating all the negative stuff. Eliminating, getting rid of all the bad, all the negative, all the toxic stuff in your life. And that includes people. That includes business partners. That includes, garbage TV, garbage music, garbage books, like garbage influences, anything that's pouring into your brain on a daily basis. You got to get rid of the negative. And just by the way the universe works, that space has to get filled with something. And if you just eliminate all the negative stuff, it's going to get filled up with something that has to be a little bit better, at least. You know what I mean? And so like, you're just going to naturally keep on growing and progressing. And dude, I hung out. I hung out with all the nerds, right? Because I was like an honor student and stuff, and I studied, but I also played sports. So I hung out with all the athletes, and dude, I hung out with all the other kids who just kind of goofed off and got in trouble and stuff all the time too. So I was very, I don't want to say chameleon, like I'm trying to fit in, but I was just, I could flow into different social settings, and I was friends with everybody in high school. I was just like, I wasn't a dick, you know what I mean? And, and so because of that, there were some kids that were troublemakers, right? And they were doing drugs after school, and they weren't engaged in stuff that I would want my kid engaged in, right? Like they were doing a bunch of trouble, some stuff like, and I got caught when I was 15 years old. No, shoot. Yeah, I was 14, I think, driving around with a kid who was 15 years old, whose dad worked night shift, and he would just take the car out and we would go driving around. And he didn't have a license, obviously.
I had a friend
right?
who did that too.
He was 15, and he would pick up me and all of our friends, and we'd go around and we'd drink and do stupid stuff. And my mom found out, and she's like, "What happened? Where were you tonight?" I was like, "I was out." No. She's like, "Who are you with?" "Yeah, who was driving you around?" I was like, "So-and-so." And she's like, "Yeah, you're not allowed to see him anymore." Right. And so like, and guess what? That entire crowd, there's at least 4 of them that have OD'd on heroin since high school. 4 of them.
Wow.
That I know in that crowd. Right. And they had a couple other ones that have been in and out of rehab and all. And like, this is before they got into all that stuff. Right. But guess what? That was like a setup to getting into bad stuff. And thank God my mom stopped me. And I wasn't, emotionally intelligent enough to do that, because they were kind of fun and cool. Right. And because they were driving 2 years before everybody else was.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Oh, this is horrible. It's not fair." But like eliminating the negative, eliminating the bad, eliminating the toxicity out of my life, then got filled in with more sports, got filled in with, student council, whatever the hell it was. I don't even remember. But doing and better crowd of people that were actually going places and doing things and not getting into the drugs and the trouble and all that stuff. And I think I wish I would have understood that. I think that's a really important concept. And here's another one. I'm gonna give you one more, is 100% accountability. My life is 100% up to me. I am where I am because of the decisions I made and the places I went, The decisions I made or decided not to make, the places I went or decided not to go, books I read or decided not to read, like the networks I put myself in or decided not to put myself in. Like you are 100% accountable for your life, 100% ownership over your life. And if you realize that, hey, the market happens to everybody, but some people sink and some people swim, kind of a thing, what's the difference? How is that possible? Well, it's because of the set of the sail, right? It's not like I live in Charleston. There's sailboats all through the harbor all the time. They're doing racing and all that stuff. And you're like, you see these sailboats and like, how does a sailboat win a race, right? Everybody's got the same sailboat. Everybody's got the same winds blowing on the sailboat, but then some of them win and some of them don't. Well, it tells you that it's not the wind that's blowing, it's the set of the sail, right? It's like what you can control that's going to dictate where you're going to go. And dude, the same economic wins and the same political wins and the same social wins and the same, all that stuff happens to all of us. They're all blowing on all of us at all the time. And what's going to get you to your destination isn't the winds and how well the winds blow. And you can't wish for a better wind. You got to wish for a better sail, right? And the wisdom to set a better sail, to take whatever wind that blows, take you wherever you want to go. And that's a Jim Rohn philosophy.
Yeah.
And,
I was going to say,
if you understand that, man, everything else falls into place.
Yeah. I was going to say some of those things reminded me of some Gary Vee in there too. I don't know if you listen to Gary Vee, but just the positivity and accountability. He talks a lot about that too. So, this has been awesome, Tim. We really appreciate it. It's just some incredible knowledge. Perspective is one of the words that comes to mind just thinking about this episode, just because of all the things you've done, all the things and everything you've been through and accomplished. So thank you so much for coming on. If people, and really enjoyed your story, they want to reach out to you, they want to get to know you, they want to follow your journey, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, man, hit me up on Facebook and Instagram. Same way that we connected on social media. I don't have business cards. I just connect with people there. So I answer my own DMs and all that stuff, right? Like you guys sent me a message and we connected. So yeah, if you guys got questions or if I can share a resource or point you in the right direction, don't hesitate to reach out. If you need some good masterminds or something you want to take a look at, hit me up and happy to kind of share some of them that I think would be good fits.
Perfect. Awesome. Really appreciate it. We'll make sure to send people your way. It's been honestly a pleasure having you on. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, Corey, Ryan, you guys did an awesome job. I appreciate all the knowledge and that you guys are spreading out there and making a big difference. Like you're planting a lot of seeds that I know are going to sprout and you're going to have a great harvest if you just keep on doing these activities, right? It's going to lead to a lot of deals and money and relationships and opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And so keep doing what you're doing, man. You guys ask great questions and I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks so much.